Hey, I am Dawn Marie Solis with Neuro Awesome Life, and I have once again the privilege to be here with Jenna Gensic and Jennifer Brunton uh, to talk about some stuff that's really poignant and immediate in thought. We're going to be talking about the qualities of being an ally. Um, Today's date, we're recording on April 28th, 2025. So, in case you're watching this much later, you'll have some context for what's in the news and what's going on right now. Um, but Jenna, why don't you kick us off and just quickly, if people haven't seen you before, let people know who you are. We're going to do it in brief this time. And then Jennifer, you can follow up and then we'll get going with this conversation.
Sure. My name is Jenna Gensic. I am the mother, sibling, and wife of some great people on the spectrum. I have been working in the autism advocacy space for about 11, 12 years now. And I created the website learnfromautisticpeople.com, where I try to engage with people who identify as autistic and share their expertise and their platforms and elevate their voices. And a lot of the work that I do professionally is trying to connect parents, caregivers, therapists, families, peers, everyone like with the autistic community and looking out to the autistic community as a foundation for all of their advocacy efforts or advice on autism.
Listen, thank you. Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Brunton. I am the co-author with Jenna of the Actually Autistic Guides books. My dog is knocking at the door. I'll be right back and I'll finish really quick. Sorry.
I love that
He's really cute too, so
we
He
all
is
have home offices. Oh
so
my
cute.
gosh. Super cute.
anyway, yes. So I'm a parent advocate. My child is grown up now, and that's something I want to kind of talk about how advocacy shifts into allyship. Um, and let's see, I also have a blog, Full Spectrum Mama, and I do a lot of editing for my kind of paid work, but I also do some consulting and stuff like that around neurodiversity and autism affirming practices and such.
So this idea of being a good ally. Uh, we just went through last week um, some stuff coming out about the government potentially starting a registry of autistic people. Now they've pulled back on that idea. Um, and I'm not naturally someone who, it doesn't matter who's in political office. I'm not very trusting of hierarchical anything. Um, I think that can be a pretty autistic quality. Not really enjoying a hierarchy, but I'm not a pro-government person, kind of from birth forward. I find most government too far removed from the individuals they may be trying to serve. So even the kindest, most generous, most moral person in a government seat is often too many steps removed from the person they're trying to serve. And often government doesn't do things well. I'm also a specific style of student of history. Um, and history tells us that whenever you start keeping track of a specific type of person, it's probably not for good motives. So it really freaked me out. This idea that I might have to be required to be on a registry because I am an autistic person, and that my children might, that my friends might. I didn't see any good purpose for that. Um, and it really scared me. A lot of people that I know were very afraid. Um, some great organizations got to work, some private citizens got to work, and the government has sort of pulled back on that idea, I do not feel relieved. I I don't feel like it's no longer an issue. And so it's one of the reasons why I felt like talking about what it is to be an ally was really important in this moment. Um, because it's not just the autistic community, it's the disabled community as a whole. Whether or not you think of yourself as autistic and disabled or disabled because you're autistic, however you think of yourself, or not disabled at all, everyone's kind of getting scooped up in one soup ladle, so to speak, as far as the government's view of us, and it's not a positive view. Um, and so I have people reaching out to me who are afraid, who are pulling back on being public with their identity as a neurodivergent person, autistic or otherwise. Um, I have people who are, like Jenna, not identifying as autistic themselves, but, loved ones who are autistic. Um, Lots of people saying they're not sure what to do or how to be. And so I felt like maybe one of the first things that we could do is talk about what a few basic elements are to being an ally. Um, and I'd like to kick it off with transparency about what a learning journey this has been for me. I have tried to be an ally my whole life, and for a lot of my life, I have done it poorly because I have assumed I knew what somebody else needed or that I had enough knowledge, right? I've talked to some people. I have an autistic friend, right? Like it's like I have a black friend and now I'm going to be anti-racist. No, that doesn't qualify you, right? A black friend, an autistic friend, fill in the blank. One person in your life does not mean you know enough to be a broad ally. And I thought I did. I really thought I did. I thought I knew enough in a bunch of different places in my life where I could provide really good allyship. And what I had to learn was I was actually taking away people's voice and replacing it with my own. And that was a devastating learning curve. It wasn't where my heart was. And so maybe Jennifer, you had mentioned you wanted to talk about the transition from being an advocate, right? Because a lot of the folks that we're hearing from are needing to be advocates for their children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but for some of us, if we have children that are able to go on to live some amount of independent lives, we do transition from advocate to ally. Um, Maybe does that seem like a good place to start talking about it, maybe that bit of a switch in mindset? Because that can be really, really hard, right? When you're a parent, you have to put in so much effort on behalf of your kid. So to change that mindset to allyship, it's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. So I've been actually giving, as Jenna knows, incessant talks this spring because a lot of libraries, sort of through a library network, found out about our work and several of them asked me to give talks on activism. I'm giving about 10 or I've just took on some more. So the 10 or 15 talks on activism um, over the spring and now into the fall. So um, one of the things that I do right off the bat is I kind of distinguish between some of these different terms. And then so in preparing for this podcast today, I kind of looked up like dictionary definitions, and they weren't really in line with what I have encountered in the neurodivergent autistic community and disabled communities about the way, and other intersectional communities about the way we use these terms. So I'm just going to put my definitions out there, and then I have a good story for the parent to for the advocate to allyship transition, but you guys may have different definitions around how you use these terms. Um, so an advocate, from what I currently know, um, is someone who advocates for another person. So they do a little learning, think about what they want to do and they think about what's best in their mind, and then they do that thing. So that's, someone with a young child who I was certainly an advocate for my child before he could advocate for himself. I was going to IEP meetings, I was meeting with teachers, I was learning about things, and your heart is in the right place, right? And sometimes that's appropriate, right? But with advocacy, it's typically something that you're doing for someone. So we have a lot of self-advocates in our audiences and channels, and I myself am an autistic self-advocate, and my son is an autistic self-advocate. But you're doing it for yourself then. But when you're an advocate for someone else, it's almost like you may have some privilege or power that you're learning. Maybe it's that parental privilege or power where you're in a position where you're appropriately needing to do something for someone. Um, and there are a lot of contexts where that becomes, like you said, obstructive to people's own growth, justice, and voices and experiences. So I think for every parent, there's going to be a moment where you're going to need to take a step back and go on to become more of an ally. And an ally, the just very simple language that I use for allyship is that you're doing it with someone. And Jenna once pointed out, and she might have gotten this from someone else, but she pointed out that allies don't necessarily designate themselves. They are designated by others. Like you can't just be like, I'm an ally and I'm going to do this. It's more about the seat that you take as a listener, as someone who's affirming and standing with someone or speaking up with someone. Um, and then there's the term that I also really like that I sometimes talk about, which is an accomplice. And that's, more someone who's ready to go to the riot with you and who's ready to, do their civil disobedience with you, do the whatever it is that you need to do. So those are kind of three different ways. You know, Advocacy is more like helping someone. And allyship is understanding we're all in this human thing together. You tell me about your human thing, you tell me what you need. I'm here. And then with accomplice, you're a little almost willing to put something more, even more on the line. So my story of my shift from as a parent from advocacy to allyship is a story that I've told a lot. I don't think I've told it in any books, but I've certainly told it in some of my talks and keynotes. But it really works here. So I really wanted to share it. Um, so in my son's junior year of high school, he had been on an IEP for a long time. He was really othered. The children who were in special education were really othered by the other kids. And at the same time, like he was actually like he was really into sports. He was really well-rounded. He was really loved. He was homecoming king, my son's. He was really loved and popular in his own way. But he still felt shamed a lot of the time and they had like a special ed hallway and stuff like that, which was just, he just felt very, very othered. And so he just started working really hard, which, try to get a teenager to work hard. Good luck with that. But if the teenager wants to work hard, so that's what he did. He worked really hard, and we went into his 3-year IEP, his junior year, and they kind of sat me down. And meanwhile, by now, like they know me, like they know that I am not that parent who's like, oh, you're right. Let's just do whatever you say. Like I was advocating AF for like, until junior year. So I come into this meeting and they're all kind of like, and they're like, Ernie no longer qualifies for an IEP. And I'm like, I'm just like his grades, his scores, everything, he can't have an IEP. And my gut instinct, I see my gut instinct is I'm going to fight this and I'm going to advocate and I'm going to blah, blah, blah. And Ernie looks at me and he goes, Mom. And I think he asked everyone to leave the room because he knew my face. He knew I was about to be like, and he did it and then his rights and this and that. So he asked everybody to leave the room and he looked at me and goes, Mom, do you trust me? And I was like, inside, I'm like, no, no, I don't. You are not capable of turning in a paper. You will walk from one side of the room to the other and lo lose your test. Like, I do not trust you at all. But I could tell in that moment that, like, there was something at, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, something important, really important. It's not the word I'm looking for at all, but something essential needed to happen. And that was that shift. And so I said, yes. So they came back in and I was like, fine. He did have a 504, but I was like, fine. And they were all like they were so, so shocked. But what's even more amazing about what happened after that was that he then worked really hard, was on the honor roll for the rest of high school. And he got into every single college he applied to with like huge scholarships. And his essay was how I got off my IEP and onto the honor roll. And like that whole, I mean, obviously it doesn't always work out so idyllically like that. And his whole college journey is a very different conversation. But that was the moment where I realized, okay, like I need to shift. I need to become an ally, not an advocate. He's a junior. He needs to do, and as an ally and a parent, that sometimes involves letting your kids make their own mistakes. Hard one, really hard one. But I think that's really important. And and that's that time that shift is going to occur is going to be different for every family, you know? But that was my shift. And I still struggle sometimes to like be, because I could sometimes mom really hard, as I'm sure you guys can. But I think that was an example of when allyship can be incredibly healthy and generative and superior to advocacy for sure in that situation.
Thanks for sharing that. Um, I didn't know my children and I were neurodivergent while they were going through school. They're all adults
Mm.
now. Um, I don't know if knowing would have helped because we would have been in that constant battle of your kids' grades are too good. You're like,
Yeah.
um, getting them the help that they needed. I don't know. I don't know that anything would have changed other than the context of the conversation. So maybe it would have helped, but I still feel active trauma from trying to get my kids help, trying to be that advocate and not having support from their other parent and being in a faith community that um, wouldn't have believed that they needed help in any way and that you don't talk about needing help, stuff like that. And I know other parents, whether they're actively in the advocating years or like, some parents, their children have enough other challenges that they will always have to be in that advocating role. Um, I know a lot of traumatized parents.
Sorry, my daughter's trying to call me. I'm trying to hang up on her.
Oh, it's okay. Um, and a lot of us, especially coming to the knowledge of our neurodivergence, your childhood, we're trying to raise our kids through all of that too. So I think for some of us, that transition from advocate, where it feels like we've been wearing battle armor whole lives, and now we have to double it because we're there for our kids and all of that. Like, think it can be really hard to know when that moment is to pivot.
Mm.
Are there moments where we need to go back to that advocate role? Like, I think that can be a really hard thing for a lot of us, especially if our kids aren't some version of self-sufficiently thriving. Um, but I also think that it almost might sound like a really lovely transition. Because if I only have to put on the battle armor for myself, right? If they
Mm.
start having the ability to do a little of their own advocating and stuff like that, then
Oh.
like okay, oh, okay, I'll be an ally now. I think I can.
Well, and I think that a lot of autistic people feel like you're speaking what you just said. You happen to be neurodivergent yourself, but I think that a lot of autistic people feel like, why are you making this about you? Right? Like their parents, for example. I mean, like my
Yeah,
son right now would probably be like, why are you making this about you? Like I'm the person, or whatever.
yeah.
Like, like, right, like, sh right. Do we need, and it's really tricky. It's a really tricky question. And it would be, oh my gosh, I mean, some people have some kind of martyr complex or something, not me. I would be more than happy to just, you know what, if I somehow by divine decree or super expert decree or whatever, someone's like, you can't do it anymore. Don't do it. I'd be like, yes. Sounds like you would too. Like, yay, I'm fine with that. That's
Mhm.
good. Yeah. I
I
don't
used
know.
to call parenting the longest babysitting job I've ever done, and where the hell are the real parents, right? Aren't they
And
supposed to
where's the
come pick you
pay?
people up at some point? Come home, take a nap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I am working on my next two books, and one of them is uh about parenting as a neurodivergent person. Um, and I have said for years now that I'm not sure I was necessarily designed to be a parent. Um, and I don't say that anymore. I mean, I sort of say that, but I don't really say that anymore because m my kids have been like, Mom, if X, Y, and Z had been different in your life, it wouldn't have been as hard as it was. So it's not
Mm.
necessarily you shouldn't have been the parent. What you needed wasn't provided, and there were people in your life that were actively abusing you. So don't put that on yourself. It's not that they think I didn't make any mistakes. They have the list, right? Because we all do. We all can look at our parents and go, "You screwed up in these 900 different ways." Um, but but they've helped me realize that it's not me that shouldn't have been a parent.
Yeah.
It's that I could have been a much better parent, and I could have had a better mental health journey through it, and all of those things had elements of my life been more supportive, or elements of my life been drastically different than they were. Um, but there are aspects of who I am that enjoy small children in tiny doses. And when you have your own children, there's no such thing as a tiny dose. Like, aren't you cute? Where's your mom?
Totally. I've just been doing this insane custody journey with grandchildren, which Jen knows a little bit about, and I won't talk about much publicly, but just to say, like, there have been people who've sort of like are suspicious that I just want more kids or like, no. I will step up if needed for small children. And if these children become more my responsibility, I will step up for that. But yeah, no thanks. I don't, yeah, yeah.
I'm not
definitely.
trying to be a grandparent. I cannot tell you how much, like from the time they were 2 on, I started talking to them about please be damn sure you really want children and you can actually take care of them because I'm not
You
taking them.
have to.
I'm like when I'm done and I love you all and I'm not going to be the parent to your children,
Yeah.
right? Which sounds
So
terrible.
you hope.
So I hope, right? Like,
Anyway.
Yeah,
so I'm
surprise.
pretty sure if my people have their own people, then I will be back in the parent seat. My life is significantly better now,
Yeah.
but I can't tell you how exhausted I feel just like even thinking about that remote possibility.
Rub it in.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding. Jenna, what do you think about neurotypical allyship?
So there's a lot. So a lot. I'm not sure. I'm trying to like prioritize what I think I should share. I think I just first of all I want to say with you guys talking about this transition, I feel like I'm living it like right now. So I just need to like soak it in and take notes because my son is a junior in high school and all these conversations are like everything you're talking about is so relevant to my life right now. Um, I will say that I think one, call it an advantage, I guess, call it a privilege, maybe. I don't know that my son has had is that because he's physically disabled, he's had a lot of services that he is qualified for because of being physically disabled. And it was an easier, well, let me start by saying because he was born so early that he was ventilator dependent for the first year of his life, that was a severe enough criteria to get him assistance very early in life, where there was in our state really long waiting lists. So because he was ventilator dependent, not because he had anything else, but ventilator dependency was able to get him some assistance. And because of that, he's always had some kind of assistance. And so we didn't have to like fight tooth and nail for that at that point. And then because he was physically disabled, that also eventually, we kind of were able to get an IEP for him before he was diagnosed with autism. And so I will say some of the things that my friends who have children on the spectrum have experienced, I have not had to battle, I guess, maybe if that's the right word, like in the same way, because there's been my son's been multiply disabled and there's been different things that have kind of kept him in the mix of support. Now, I won't say that's been easy. It's not been easy to get those services and share that and keep some kind of centralized. I guess we called it a care plan when he was younger because he had so many medical needs. Um, so his journey is a little bit different. Because I would say that I do wonder if the question about being on an IEP would have come a long time ago had he not been diagnosed with cerebral palsy.
Mm.
Um, uh, and but yeah, a lot of the things you're
Yeah,
saying,
because
I'm
of his
living.
spectacular grades and test scores and that kind of
Right.
stuff. Right?
Yep.
Yep,
Right.
yep, yep.
Even though even though he has vision hearing disability and he has executive functioning challenges and things that, like he tends to get distracted and hyper focus on certain parts of problems. There's multiple like more invisible sort of things that he struggles with, given the environments that he's in. But some of those services he's still been able to keep because of other disabilities he had. But I would say that this idea of switching like from being an advocate to an ally, I think is something I've been trying to actively be doing for several years now. But that's really only because of the work that I've been doing in the autistic community, hearing people talk about it and how important that is. Because when he came out, my first son, 1 pound, 12 ounces with a whole host of things going on. Like I was like the person like keeping track of all the things and who need to be doing what and like only certain people could take care of. It was like just to keep him alive was a challenge for the first couple of years. So I was like and that was my first child. So that was like what I thought parents did. And then like when my daughter came and they just like sent her home after a couple of days in the hospital, I was like, I don't know what to do. Doesn't seem right. I should have like a lot of training. There should be a lot more going on. So I was that person. So it's been years of I don't want to say unlearning it, but kind of backing off that, like what you guys are saying, like kind of backing off a little bit and understanding like where my advocacy can end and should end. But I think that what I've been doing for him in the last couple years is really just trying to educate him about an unjust world so that he can, not necessarily saying he has to do X, Y, or Z, but just saying like, in most situations, some teachers, if you have this type of class and they're doing this type of curriculum, your IEP may say this, but they might not do it because they have a time constraint, like constant little things like that. And it's like, so you have the choice to, to say something to your teacher if you want, or you let it go. But these are certain situations that will happen. Or when you're in or I don't know, like, for example, in gym class, when he feels like he's discriminated against in gym class because his teacher is trying to put him in more of like a token participation role instead of something that he really wants to do. So I try to, like, without calling people out specifically, just say, there's a lot of discrimination in the world. There's a lot of ableism in this world. People sometimes think this. We don't think that as a family, but there's a lot of people who do. And because he's slowly understanding that, and he by now he knows that it's everywhere. But I think in some ways, he has been naive to it because he's been in, I would think, a relatively supportive atmosphere for a long time. So the more and more as he gets older and wants to try new things and I think educating him about that is important. So that's what I've been trying to do instead of being the person that contacts the teacher and be like, hey, that was really crappy what you did to my son. And I don't like it and he doesn't like it. And I'm going to contact the administration so that they can do an investigation. Like, try more and more to do that, because I know that he's going to be 18 in a year and I'm not going to apply for like legal guardianship or anything. So trying to let him try to do more of that himself. And he seems interested, but I think it's been helpful just to like talk about it, like talk about what he's upset about and talk about, yeah, that's unfair. And that's like what the world's like. But there is a fine line. I mean, then there's a whole other topic about like fine line between like teaching someone and preparing them for reality versus like trying to change the system and make it so that that's not the reality, right? There's a balance to that and what you have to do. And I would say, as a neurotypical parent, the allyship is something I'm very interested in, like exhibiting that behavior, but it's a very uncomfortable space to be in talks like this, because it's tricky to know where exactly that role should be. I think that I've tried really hard. I think Jenny has helped me in this. I think what's kind of fuels me is like understanding that my efforts are important, even if I make mistakes. Like that's still wanted on some way, that there's some kind of space for that, for people who are trying, even if they make mistakes, they're not part of that community. They don't identify with that community themselves. But if you're trying to like constantly defer to autistic people and try to serve with or whatever, try to work with a group of people, that there's a space for people that are trying really hard, as long as you're not defensive and trying to, pursue your own agenda and try to justify all of your actions. So I think that's what I keep, having to tell myself, because I had like, I'll just tell one quick story that kind of sticks with me, because I think this is important, because I think a lot of people, neurotypical people in this space might experience similar things. But I was working on a book project. This was before Jenny and I started working together, and we had just started talking about, I just started getting the seeds of the first book that we were working on, but this is before we had kind of agreed to work together. And I had reached out to somebody who in the autistic community who I really respected and who had done an interview on my website, and I liked their work. And she had done an interview, and then I asked if I could quote from the interview in the book. And she sent me like a really, really blunt, email about how inappropriate it was that I was trying to work on a book to serve the autistic community, and that I should be paying all the contributors, anybody who's quoted, regardless of whether or not they spent time and interviews on the book, or just even if they were quoted, like just kind of like basically that it was a very ethical dilemma for her and that she absolutely wouldn't be involved. And I was surprised because she had given an interview, and I thought was a great interview and said really positive things. I thought we were pretty well aligned. So that hit me kind of hard and kind of like a gut check, like, oh gosh, like do I even have any kind of space? Because at the time, like, I'm not a big organization. I'm a mom of four. I was just trying to like get some more autistic voices out there. I was trying to like, I thought I was doing good work. I wasn't, and I don't have a lot of capability to pay people a lot of money. Like my husband's a school teacher. I was a stay-at-home mom. Like I was going to make a personal investment just to try and maybe even self-publish a book. Like that was when I was first getting started. So, and I was honest about all that. And I was already going to donate a percentage of the proceeds to a group that prioritized autistic voices. So, so I was kind of just getting started, but I think that was just like, it was a reminder to me that like that space is kind of touchy and I have to constantly be aware of what, like if I'm trying to serve or trying to work with people, I have to constantly be getting feedback and be open to that and not be defensive about it. So I think that it sticks with me because it was someone I really respected. And I think that I'm glad that it hasn't like totally turned me off, because I feel like there's enough people that want to do good, that are well-intentioned, that just need a little bit extra help in the right direction. So I hope that that's who I'm trying to like work with in the ally space. People who don't really care about being allies, but just want to develop relationships. I guess that's what I think of when I think of a good ally, I guess, is someone who has positive relationships. I think of it more as like a friendship and positive relationship. If you're a good ally, you can like be in a trusting relationship with the people that you are working with. And they trust you and you trust them. And you're not trying to serve your own agenda. I feel like I'm just babbling now. I think I went off of
That's
what I was going to say,
awesome.
or just
No, I think
Um,
that's basic. That's very basic, fundamental to this idea of the ally.
yeah.
Can I say one more thing? Um,
Mhm.
so what I'm doing a lot of now in my talks is talking about how to take that and then bring it into a practical activism sphere. So like I talk about it from the level of like starting in the home. Like kind of like the format of both of our books, particularly the second
Mhm.
book, like where how you're an ally in the home, how you might be an ally when you go out into public spaces. And then I talk about being an ally in cultural spaces and then in social and political spaces and public spaces. And those are all, places where you can live what you just said about just being with people, being present to them, listening to them, centering their voices. Um, but then the question is that I sort of try to answer, but it's kind of a broad answer, is like, how does that translate into change at the levels where we're seeing frightening developments now, right? How do we bring allyship into our activism? What if, some of us are extreme introverts, right? Do we write letters? Do we, amass online communities? Do we call our politicians? Like, how do we do those things as allies? All of those kinds of activism um, that are it's becoming apparent are incredibly necessary. How do we do those as an ally? And we do it as an ally by starting with what Jenna just described. Whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, right?
I had a similar experience in the anti-racism work that I do, where someone angrily asked me how many protests I'd been to. Um,
Mhm.
and I haven't been to protests in a number of years due to some disabilities. Um, that and I had to get, I mean, in my queer advocacy, I mean, one of my kids' earliest memories was accompanying me on a march and a candlelight vigil and stuff like that, right? So like It's not that it's not something that I've ever done, but it's not something I've done in a number of years because of some disability challenges. Um, I hope we didn't just lose Jenna.
She's probably moving
Nope,
for the
I'm still
sunlight.
here. Yep, sorry. I'm trying to move out of the sun. I'm moving inside.
No
Yeah,
worries at all.
exactly. Go ahead.
Um, your camera just turned off, that's all. So uh, you know, I felt defensive. I tried not to act defensive. But there was no explanation that was gonna be right for this individual. I could not be a safe person because I wasn't out in the protests. Um, and I believe they have every right to that opinion. I also think that when we narrowly define who can stand with us, we lose a lot. Um, and we see this in the autistic community where we kind of snipe at each other, not kind of. There's a lot of angry sniping around ABA therapy, around, there are a lot of opinions about how to do being autistic right. Like you're not autistic enough, you're using your kids to benefit you. Like there's just so much angry criticism out there. And one of the things that I am trying to promote is try to recognize when your own trauma might be excluding people who could help you.
Or who could
Because,
stand with you, right?
right. And so for me, when I think of an ally, uh, different from an advocate or a co-conspirator, right? An ally is someone who is willing to be visibly with you, publicly with you. Now, that might be as seemingly insignificant as I will be your Facebook friend.
Yeah. Because, yeah, that's sort of what I was trying to get at is that we have different ways that we are able to ally and
Right.
and and speak up with people.
So,
Yeah.
you were saying in the beginning, what's your definition of like allyship? For me, it's the visible presence of you with people who you may appear different from.
Hmm.
Um, I did not have intellectual disabilities until 3 years ago when I got hit by a car and I got a brain injury. And now I have some struggles. I mean, you might think of dyslexia as an intellectual disability. We're learning that dyslexia is not necessarily, but you have to learn how to use your brain, or it can be very disabling. Um, but I did not think of myself as disabled before the brain injury, and now I have some pretty impactful things that I'm dealing with. But one of the things I faced prior to the brain injury was people being mad at me for not thinking being autistic was a bad thing. I would get parents of autistic children that had some pretty significant intellectual disabilities, and they were lumping that all in as, autism one and the same. And I would say, well, I'm autistic, and the way I experience being autistic is not unhappy for me. They'd get really mad. They'd get really angry with me. And I wasn't a safe person for them. And in the beginning, that really devastated me. And I let it get too much in my head. Like, oh, well, maybe I can't stand up for people, maybe I don't know enough about disability, maybe I don't. And so, yeah, great. Go on the learning journey, right? Learn more, talk to people more. But I think if we would like to be an ally, we have to also have a little bit of a thick skin because there's going to be somebody who wants to kick you out of the group. Somebody's going to think you don't belong here. And that's fine, okay. They would not like you as their ally. But there will be people who would. Just, continue to have an open mind, continue to be willing to learn. Try not to get shut down because there's some people who won't see you as an ally. Find the people who do. I have an abundance of people of color in my life that are like, "Oh, Don Marie, don't let those people get in your head, right? You're a really good ally. You're a good advocate. You're good, right? Like, keep doing you. Don't worry about those people." That can be really, really hard when somebody has a big opinion about what I'm doing is not being appropriate. I want to be open-minded to that. I've learned I can't be consumed by it. And I think that can be difficult in the ally journey. Because especially as a lot of people have access to our lives who don't really know us. If we say something online, if we're publicly present, somebody's going to feel free to have an opinion.
And I think it's fair that like those big voices, like I think it's a great what you said was nice, like not to be consumed by it. Like I think that's really important. And I think that most of the time, those big voices, even if they're inappropriate for like a widespread recommendation, there's probably some truth. There's something we could listen to in that, and we can still like learn from that. And even if that person doesn't want you as an ally, you can still like learn from that and maybe apply that as you can your, I don't know, ally journey or whatever journey. I don't even know if ally journey is the right thing. I kind of just like your journey to being a better person. You can kind of take that and move with it. I also wanted to say that one thing that I struggle with is understanding that the mistakes that I'm making, if I'm making a mistake in advocate, or if someone's really upset by what I'm doing, that it's like not the first time that that's happened. So like I'm continually part of this like process or this system that is causing trauma. So I do tend to take criticism more seriously, I think, than maybe perhaps I should sometimes, just because I'm aware that like it doesn't really matter if I was well intentioned, like that the large mass of those well intentions gone wrong can be traumatic for somebody, and that's real. And so I don't like to take criticism lightly, and that's part of my personality, but I think that's just part of my understanding of what my role is too. So and I don't have a great answer for that other than just to be open-minded and try your best. But that is something that I struggle with a little bit.
But we have that in our first book, and it's something that I go to a lot in my talks because I always talk about these principles that we lay out just in the introduction of our first book. And the fifth principle is everybody makes mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that was something that right when you and I started writing together, and it was not long after I had left being a professor and moved into just deciding to be a freelance editor. And I was also doing a lot of freelance writing and getting editorial suggestions back that I always found very painful, like for the first couple of years. And then all of this kind of happened at the same time with working with you and working more as a professional writer and editor, realizing like, and it's similar, I think, in the allyship space as in the writing space. Like sometimes you're gonna listen to whatever the person is trying to school you on. And sometimes you're going to take it really, like, you're always going to listen to it. But sometimes you're going to take it in and you're going to make those changes. And sometimes you're not. Like sometimes they're wrong. I mean, I know that we feel like everybody has their own truths. I don't really go with that. I was an ethics professor for a really long time. I do think that there are facts, and I'm not a moral relativist at all. But everybody has a reason for what they're saying, etc. But sometimes people are wrong. Sometimes people are coming from a place of really deep trauma and they're lashing out. And sometimes they're right, and sometimes you're like, ooh, I shouldn't have said that, and I won't do it again. Thank you. Like that's where you can get to that point, I think has been huge for me, for Jenna, and maybe also for you, Don Marie, like where an honest, heartfelt critique doesn't have to feel like an attack. It might initially, but then you manage it as you might manage an editorial suggestion.
Oh, we froze. I hope we get everybody back.
Oh, okay.
Oh, oh,
Oh,
oh, here we
Oh,
go. Back.
oh, okay. I just said something really important. I don't really remember what it was. I think I was just saying now is the time that we need allies
Yes.
more than
Yeah.
so.
She was echoing
So,
what you said at the
so
start
and,
of our
and then going
conversation.
back to what you said at the beginning of the before we started recording, I think that like that's what's going on, that self-advocacy isn't going to be enough right now with the giant sweeping disasters.
yeah. And, we were talking about sort of the process of processing critique, criticism, suggestion, whatever. For those of us who are rejection sensitive, that's an extra journey. I've had to learn how to take what people say and not fixate on it, not ruminate on it to the point where I am then damaged by it. And I find that challenging. That's a continuing learning curve for me that I am better at, a lot better. But I think a lot of autistic people are now managing more anxiety and fear than maybe they ever have because of these things that are coming out of the news that are very specifically and um, directly antagonistic to the autistic community. Um, the I know people who have lost their research funding, who have lost their jobs, who have been very quickly and starkly negatively impacted by what's happening in Washington, D.C. I know even for myself, I kind of start out each day more tired, right?
Mhm.
Like we were already fighting the battle we had, and now there's an extra one. And I'm hearing from so many sweet autistic people, autistic adults who are too afraid, too tired, too traumatized. They kind of want somebody else to carry more of the weight. And knowing that you have allies can be imperative to the survival of whatever it is we're going through. If we're gonna come out some other side, whatever that looks like, if we're gonna come out with anything better, if you are willing to be any kind of ally, a publicly recognized I stand with autistic people person, even if it's just that person is out and autistic and I am their friend on Facebook and I won't cancel them. Okay? Like, if my employer finds out I'm friends with autistic people online, I'm gonna brave it and I'm gonna be it, right? I'm gonna thumb up a pro autism post. I'm gonna share appropriate information about autism. Um, whatever level it is that you can be, those of us who are feeling extra afraid, extra anxious, extra whatever, can know you're there. That can make a huge difference.
And I just want to put in a plug for taking it to the next level if possible to, you know, the people who are making these policies, to your schools, to your workplaces. You know, and there are so many different ways to do this, you know, from just kind of you're in a space and someone uses a discriminatory word, like talking about that, like, just even little things like that, to calling
Mhm.
your politicians, to marching, to all, there are so many ways to do this that are obviously incredibly important right now.
We're up against time. Um, we've talked about the transition for parents and caregivers. We've talked about the need for obvious allies. You are both neck deep in autistic communities. Is there something else that we could at least mention of a need that you're hearing for this moment? Anything that the communities you're involved with are bringing up that we haven't already touched on?
I don't think we've talked much about the diminution and attacks on trans rights. The autistic community is heavily trans, heavily queer, and I want to speak just to that. Like, our trans friends are really scared. They're even more scared than, it's
My
sorry.
eldest is trans. Um,
So I
and
want
I
to
have,
have that in this very openly. Sorry.
so
Yeah.
I think it's really important we show how we feel about this. So I am grateful to you for showing how you feel about this. I can't remember it might be ABC. One of the three big TV networks has started making um, personal stories about intersex people and people with uh, genetic makeups outside of the binary. Um, and so I've started sharing those when I come across them because they're really good stories
Yeah.
of, I am a person and this is my genetic makeup. And it's different
Hmm.
from the male female sex binary. Um, this is how I look on the outside, and this is my biology. Um,
And that's a
Hmm.
fantastic allyship thing that we could be doing. That's just kind of like
Hmm. My husband's
normalizing
a
the normal.
my
Sorry.
husband's a biology teacher. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but he, ever since like the the Human Genome Project has finished, and it's become pretty clear that there's all sorts of variations in sex development. It's surprising. It's shocking how much backlash there is to teaching that even in a science classroom, at least in our state. So it's ridiculous, but he like ensures that like that's kind of taught because it's reality, not because he's trying to push some kind of political ideology or agenda, just because that's reality and that's science and that's what is in the standards now. But it's remarkable how much backlash there still is culturally to even to talking about that. But I think he has a unique vantage point being an autistic biology teacher that, I mean, I don't know that he's talking about autism specifically, like how his lived reality with his students, but he's definitely talking about the biology of sex development, and he has plenty of transgender students and who um but because the school's policy have to be misgendered because that's what their parents have chosen. And so that's tricky in how to navigate that. So he's kind of doing his part to do things like call people by their last names, everybody, so everybody feels like they're being treated the same way, and they're not being or they're not being forced to use alternate. So there's all different things, but that you have to be a pretty savvy person to kind of be putting that out in that kind of I don't know, environment. But anyway, I don't know. I have a great answer for this. Just that there's still, like, he experiences a lot of backlash still. Um, but I think, yeah, starting with understanding reality and having empathy is a great foundation.
Seems pretty basic, but
Yeah, seems pretty much a given, you'd think. But yeah, I say hi.
oh,
Interesting
Yeah.
that one of the loudest voices for we're all unique is the autistic community, because how much we like sameness. The autistic brain is designed for process and order and A to B and even binary thinking. And right now, one of the louder voices for can we please accept that everybody's unique, different, is the adult autistic community, because of our lived experience. The queer community, queer/trans community, and the neurodivergent community are incredibly interlaced. I won't quote statistics because I never know if I'm getting them right, but it's well more 50% of queer people are also neurodivergent in some way. And when there's so much effort to make who you are wrong as a human, they've got to start questioning. Okay, not going to tell other people how to think. I start questioning, how am I thinking? How am I being in this world that could accidentally say, okay, that's not a right kind of human. That person's too different from me. And so I'm on a board of directors for an organization that the founder of the organization just called me like, I'm getting all this hate because I won't kick the ABA people off my site. And I said, we agreed when we kind of revamped your organization and reemerged that we were going to try to be a place where we were going to have conversations. We weren't going to say, that voice is excluded. Obviously, we have to be kind to one another. But I think in this conversation about being an ally, it can be very challenging to know an appropriate amount of protectiveness, an appropriate amount of standing for good language, good ideas, and that exclusion that is going to continue this idea of being enemies. Because if we're enemies, we don't have to see each other as people. Yeah. We have permission to see each other as just wrong. And I guess for me, that's my, what am I hearing from my community and what am I taking away from it? It's, yeah, share what your preferred language is, share what your ideas are, share those things, and then try really, really hard to hear the people who you don't agree with. Because if we can't find our connecting places, we stay in that enemy category. And if we stay enemies, nothing gets safer for anybody. It's my opinion. Anything else before we wrap it up?
Thanks for hosting.
Yeah. Thanks for having this
Absolutely.
conversation. I'd love to come back and have more of a conversation about the section of the queer trans community and neurodivergence. There are other videos on my YouTube from a couple of years ago, really, really good research, science-based, all of that kind of stuff. But I also think that lived experience, that human piece is really important. Yeah. All right. Thank you both.
Absolutely.
I really
Thanks so
appreciate
much.
Thank you.